How come your revenue is tanking? How come everything seems to be working? Those two questions come up all the time, especially in younger business, in relation to a surprising answer if you don't see it coming, and that answer is seasonality. Seasonality is a way bigger factor in many e-commerce businesses than most folks recognize, and today on the Interference podcast, I am going to tell you all about what I see here working with entrepreneurs, why I think this is so important to internalize, and how to plan your revenue, plan your ad spend, and not freak out when the seasonal headwinds and tailwinds hit your business. Let's dive in. Younger businesses, and by younger, I mean businesses that have not experienced, say, 3 full years of serious ad spend. And by serious, I should define that too. Serious means when your ad spend grows to a point where it becomes hard to really push it up a lot more. You grow, and you kind of hit a plateau, and it becomes a big challenge in the business. Okay, and it doesn't even have to be ad spend; it could be any kind of way you're acquiring customers. But but brands that have experienced less than 3 years of that kind of thing often have a really hard problem, which is forecasting your business related to the calendar. It's forecasting your business related to the calendar is really challenging. Forecasting the business in general is a very challenging exercise, but a really important one. I've come to believe one of the most important ones in e-commerce. Not even to be right, but just to plan your business accordingly. But while forecasting your business is really important, there is this massive factor in your forecast that is very hard to see until it happens, which is seasonality. And the truth is, in earlier stage businesses, the future is simply not like the past enough for the past to tell you about the future. In earlier stage businesses that are growing and things are going well, what happens, right, is that like you launch a new ad and suddenly your ad spend goes from $10,000 a month to $40,000 a month. And then you do some more ads or launch a new offer or launch a new product and goes from 40 to 75 or 100 or whatever. And the business just keeps changing. And so those changes happen all the time and you get used to it. And what happens is as those changes happen in the business, you start to see that or you start to get used to them and you start to get used to spends and you don't recognize that those changes are happening for all kinds of reasons. A lot of times, you'll have a big increase in revenue at the same time you launch some new ads, and you can't figure out exactly why that's happening because the ads seem to be going well, but you're not like, oh, these are amazing or whatever. And what you don't realize at the time is that actually you launch those ads right when there are massive seasonal tailwinds. And so you're pushing forward. And so everything is going great. Everybody's excited. And you build a new forecast and you go, oh, the future is going to be amazing. Everything is working. We're crushing. And then suddenly you run into these massive headwinds. But you don't know they're headwinds is the problem. You think you're doing something wrong. And I've had this conversation so many times with entrepreneurs where you just go like, wait a minute, something is going wrong in this business and we can't figure it out, and every ad we launch doesn't work, and every offer we try doesn't work, and even when we do discounts, the moment's not as big as we thought, and our Black Friday is not as big as we want it to be, whatever. Like all of these things happen and you can't figure out why it's not working as well as you thought, and you miss forecast, and it can be a real big problem, right? Because you order inventory to meet a forecast and maybe you've got a whole bunch of inventory on the shelf now, and it's just really, really hard. And all along, you have this sense in the business that something is wrong. Again, this is a conversation I've had so many times with entrepreneurs. Everybody's looking at each other like, we just can't seem to win no matter what we do. What's going on? And the answer is the answer you don't see coming is that seasonality is a huge, gigantic, insane factor in the business. And until you've gone through it 2 or 3 years, it's very hard to see it coming. It's very hard to know what to make of it. It's hard to plan around it. And it just becomes this massive factor that you really don't see coming at all, like I said. So this is the first thing I want you to recognize about your business. I want you to stop right now and think, is there seasonality in my business that I don't see coming? Some businesses have this in a way where it's just really obvious that you have really big seasonality and you don't actually have to ask this question very much, but you start to go, for example, highly holiday oriented gifting businesses tend to have this kind of thing happen where they recognize that they're going to be a gift oriented purchase. And so they're going to do well. Sometimes health and wellness brands know that, January is a really big time for them, end of December into January, et cetera, and that maybe holidays not as big, et cetera. But there are much smaller ones that are happening all the time in businesses that people just don't see coming. And I can't even really give too many specific examples because it can be so all over the place. Well, here's one. I worked once with an apparel brand that was a headwear brand, and they had this really consistent increase in spring into summer and decrease. I think it was in really Q1. Before that was the lowest period of the year. And they you looked at their revenue chart and you looked at like their contribution margin, you looked at their like ROAS on Facebook, like whatever, everything pointed to this same thing. And year after year after year, as they grow, they kept having this. And the revenue chart would always look the same, where ROAS would get really bad in Q1 and spend would go down and revenue would go down, and ROAS would be really good, well above profitability in Q2 during that kind of peak moment, and revenue would go up as well at the same time. And so what this brand seemed to figured out eventually was that their headwear was particularly appealing in the spring and into summer, right? And so they kind of knew that, but they didn't really plan the rest of the business around that very well. They were spending too much in January, February, and not enough in spring and summer. And so what they probably should have done was try to hold a more constant ROAS and have their performance be about the same throughout the year, but just spend less in Q1, spend more in Q2. And so that way they kind of maintain some profitability goal all throughout the year. I'm gonna come back to that point in just a second. But the point is, it happened a few years in a row, but they probably didn't really realize how big of a factor it was, because the product didn't seem that seasonal. I mean, they were selling hats. Like people wear hats year round. Certainly I do, right? And and so why would a hat make such a big difference at spring or summer versus in winter, when you're wearing hats all the time? Especially, this headwear brand was based in a warm weather climate. And so again, it wasn't getting that cold in the winter, and people just kind of wore slightly warmer clothes in the winter or whatever. And the point is, it was very hard for them to see it coming until it came. And so their spend plan didn't really reflect a deep internalization of the reality of seasonality. And this is really the thing that I want to get to. Many brands simply don't take this seriously enough. And what I want you to hear more than anything else in this episode of this show is that if you do not truly, deeply internalize this issue in your business, what you will do is you will fight really, really hard and grind really, really hard to eke out a little extra revenue in your low moments, because you're like, we got to generate more value here. And probably you will not do enough work and planning to actually maximize your big moments, because it will feel like, okay, it's easy right now, we can sort of relax a little bit. And that's exactly the wrong way to approach seasonality. If you've listened to my show for a while now, and I hope you know that I do not bring on sponsors that I don't personally use with my clients, which is why I think of a sponsorship as much a recommendation as a sponsorship. And that's also why I'm excited to recommend to you and to introduce you to my newest sponsor, BILY, BILY. And you can get to their website at bi.ly. The link is in the show notes. BILY, my newest sponsor, is, simply put, a drastically upgraded pixel for your meta ads that tracks the user and conversion data on your store better than any other alternative, with 100% server-side tracking. And what that means is, when you install BILY on your store, the user event tracking on your store will get much more accurate, which means your in-platform attribution will be more accurate, which is very helpful on its own. But also, by giving Meta the most accurate data and the most total data, you also feed its machine learning better, which improves optimization and performance. And I know this because BILY first reached out to me about 6 months ago to sponsor my show. And I told them, I'm interested, but I want to test it first. So I installed it on 3 different stores that I work with. And in every case, the event match quality significantly improved in Meta's Events Manager, and it outperformed even other third-party pixel installs in split tests. The result is that not only did I kick off my sponsorship with them, but I'm now using BILY on every one of my clients' store. It's becoming SOP for me. That's how much I believe in it. On top of all that, BILY is priced incredibly competitively. No other solution in the market will come close to them. BILY starts at just $1 per day. And for most of my listeners, BILY will need to get you like 1, maybe 2 more conversions per month for it to be worth spending on. BILY also doesn't do that thing where it raises your pricing threshold for forever. If you come in at a lower threshold than you were at in the last month, they will actually bring your price down automatically. It's really nice. It's like great SaaS pricing. So everyone listening to this podcast right now running Meta ads should use BILY, but especially if you're currently using the native Shopify Meta Pixel install. It is an absolute no-brainer. You should stop what you're doing and go install BILY right now, which you can do by going to BI.ly. It's BI.ly. The link is in the show notes to install BILY immediately. Here's the key point. If you recognize the seasonality in your business, you really internalize that, then you should plan everything around your marketing calendar, your spend, your product calendar, all those things with seasonality as a major factor. Now, if you don't have a major amount of seasonality, this is a smaller issue. I get that, right? But again, check this in your business. Look at your historicals. And if you're earlier stage, again, your historicals might not reflect this very well because it's hard to see these big dips and bumps in the revenue, the peaks and valleys in the revenue, if you don't have that much history, okay? But one simple thing you can do, and maybe this will be a helpful practical step for you, is to go to Google Trends and type in the main categorical search term for your brand if you exist in a category. If you're selling desks, right? Like if you're selling desks, I don't know if there's any desk seasonality, but go to Google Trends, look at the last 5 years in your country that you are in, and search like buy desk, like BUY, buy a desk, or desks for sale, or something like that. Go find those terms and look and see if there is any consistent seasonality to that. And you know, the easy example of this is if you look at a brand that's in an obviously seasonal category like swimwear, right? Like if you go look and see about swimwear, you'll notice very clearly, very certainly that that there is a seasonal trend to swimwear. And your revenue is very, very, very likely to reflect that demand curve based off of that search volume. Instead of me saying this theoretically, here, let me just show you what I mean, okay? If I pull up Google Trends over the last 5 years I thought of the swimwear example a second ago. So I searched the term bikini, okay? There you go, bikini, clearly a hyper-specific product and that somebody might be looking for, okay? That would have reason to be highly seasonal. If I just mouse over, I look last 5 years, I'm in the US, last 5 years, what you'll see here very clearly is that bikini search volume goes up and down on exactly the curve that you would expect, right? And so in March, bikini swimwear has a little spike in, well, it's 2020, so that's kind of a weird year. Let's get out of 2020. 2020, some crazy stuff happened. Don't know if you remember that. But in March of 2021, it starts to pick up, stays high all the way through June, starts to go down by the end of July and end of August. I've already finished the main summer season, and now it goes down through the fall into winter. And maybe by winter, it's starting to slowly pick up again as people are starting to shop, thinking excitedly about the day when it will be less cold and they can go outside again to the beach or to the pool or whatever it is. And that same trend follows every single year. And here's the point. When you look at a trend like this, it is unbeatable. The headwind is so strong that you are simply not going to really win if you are a bikini brand. You're not going to really win in the fall and in the winter. Now, if you're selling bikinis, you probably know this, right? Because it's so obviously part of it. But what I've noticed is that many brands don't recognize how big of a factor this is in their business. So go do this same exercise. Look for the core categorical search terms and see. And what I want you to begin to do is, even if you don't have a lot of historical sales data, you can begin to plan your revenue this way. Because what you'll see is that your revenue generation is going to follow that demand curve in the same way, almost for sure. Almost for sure, it's going to follow that in somewhat of the same way. And so, what do you do about this? Well, this is the first thing that you do, okay? Number one, you plan. Take more seriously seasonality, hear my warning here, and start by planning. First, look in your historical data and see if you see any of those trends, okay? Second, go do the Google Trends search that I just showed you, okay? Because all you care about is relative volume. You don't care about TAM, so Google Trends is a perfectly good tool here. It's going to give you relative volume for any term that you care about, okay? So go check that out and see what you find there if you go and look for the core term there, and then begin to plan your revenue like that. As you're forecasting your ad spend, this is what I mean by plan. As you're forecasting your ad spend, as you're forecasting your inventory buys throughout the year, assume increases and decreases seasonally relative to those moments. Okay. Assume significant increases and decreases relative to those moments. Now, this gets tricky if you are, again, like more holiday oriented. I think about when I was at FC Goods, we sold wallets made out of baseball gloves. I've said this before, right? But there were basically 50 days, give or take 5, in the calendar that really, really mattered for the business. Overwhelmingly, the revenue in the business happened in the lead up to Father's Day and in the holiday season. And that was like, I think 75% of the revenue throughout the year came in those 50 or 60 days because it was a highly giftable product. Father's Day and holiday drove all the value. And we figured that out at some point, right? We planned around it and we figured out that, okay, we need to make, we are going to assume that our revenue is going to spike in those moments really drastically and it's going to come down in those other moments. But before that, before we had planned on it, what we did was we tried so hard to drive revenue throughout the rest of the year. And so when I say plan, the first thing I mean is forecast, right? Forecast the business for those seasonal moments. But the second thing I mean is don't just forecast it, but actually think about your marketing calendar and think about the marketing efforts you're going to make seasonally. Think about those as always trying to ride the tailwinds and not fight the headwinds. What I mean is, like when we were at FC Goods, we would try to do these like special releases between major moments, right? We do these special limited edition releases and try and drive a bunch of value. We do product releases and do all these different things between these major moments so that we were trying, because we were so frustrated. You know, when if it's February in that business and you're just watching your revenue trickle in at a couple grand a day, and you know that like a couple months ago you were doing 30, 40 grand a day in revenue, right? It's just so frustrating because you can't get your ads to spend profitably and you don't know what to do. And it's just a mess. And so you're sitting there going, how do we drive more revenue? And you look at the down period, and you think, if I could just make the down periods bigger, I would win a lot better. But I want you to consider the problem there. If I can make a down period in my business, let's say I'm going to do $100,000 on a down period, okay? If I can make that period 10% better, then I am going to drive an additional $10,000. And I am going to kill myself to do it, okay? But of course, and you see where this is going, if I have a seasonally high period where we were going to do $500,000 in a month, okay, and I do 10% better, I've now driven an additional 50 grand. And it probably takes just about the same amount of effort to do it, okay? And so if you spend your time trying desperately to make that down period bigger, then you are going to be really spinning your wheels. But what if instead you just accept the reality that your headwinds are going to be really hard to overcome seasonally, and instead put all of your efforts into things that are going to make your tailwinds bigger? So you start to think instead, wait a minute, what if I did my limited edition release actually in the run up to Father's Day? So I created another marketing moment within that. What if I took the 20 or so shopping days in the Father's Day season, it's really like 15 to 20, something like that, and I had really good marketing moments in each of those days. I had great emails to send every one of those days. And so I did a limited release in there, and I did a promotion in there, a gift with purchase. And then I did a sale. And then I did we'll pay your priority shipping for free. And then I did another new product release. So a limited edition release here, whatever. And you thought about how I can really maximize every day in that calendar. What is very likely to happen is, and in creative development, right? What if you took all of your energy in February, and instead of developing new creative in your ad account to try to make your evergreen spend bigger there, what if instead you took all of that extra energy and said, we're just going to accept our current ad spend. We're going to just spend the, $1,000, $2,000 a day that we can possibly get through here. And instead of trying to turn that $1,000 or $2,000 and spend a day into $2,500 or into $1,500 or whatever it is, we're instead going to try and make it so that when we're spending $10,000 a day in 2 months, we can actually spend $15,000 a day. We're going to generate tons of creative and tons of offers to make that moment bigger, to throw out that moment. Then you can make that moment a whole lot bigger by putting all of your effort there. And so that's what I mean by plan. Just last night, I was with a friend of mine who had grown a big and successful e-commerce business, and he had done that a lot with talent from the Philippines filling major roles in his company. And what he told me about it was exactly what I have always said when I talk about my sponsor, More Staffing, which is I just don't understand why a company that is already remote wouldn't go pursue talent in the Philippines for their e-commerce business. It is such a win-win across the board that it just makes so much sense. And he was saying that his business had been transformed by incredible talent in the Philippines. And I hear that story all the time from people who work with More Staffing. More Staffing can help you locate, recruit, train, and onboard incredible talent from the Philippines for your e-commerce business across all parts of the business. That's the marketing team, operations, customer service, whatever, supply chain, anywhere in the business, there's access to incredible talent. And here's the simple value proposition. You will find highly talented people with great resumes in the Philippines who you will pay a high rate relative to local rates in the Philippines, but a low rate relative to rates domestically in the US, which is a win-win. You attract incredible talent. You also protect your OpEx and the cost of your business. Everybody wins in that situation, and you can end up generating a really awesome business. In fact, More Staffing was founded out of a company that had staffed up to I think it was 20 folks in the Philippines alongside a US-based team that was much, much smaller. They built the whole business on that, and they saw the value it produced in that business and could produce in a whole bunch more. I use them personally. I have now 5 team members, might even be 6, and they're just awesome. They're a great part of the team, and I found them also through working with my friends at More Staffing. So go to morenow.co/AF. There's a link in the show notes, morenow.co/AF, to get going, finding and onboarding incredible talent from the Philippines for your business today. As I said before, if you are growing a remote team, there is simply no reason not to at least take a call, look at some resumes, and see what that can do for your business. When I say plan, I mean first accept, part of this is cash planning, honestly, and inventory planning. Accept the reality that you are going to be slower in those months. Accept that you may even lose money in those months. I've dealt with another seasonal business that for a long time was not profitable for 10 months out of the year. And then they were highly profitable and put 10 to 15% on the bottom line on an annualized basis because their November, December was so profitable. Okay. And so you can do that. You can actually lose money for 10 months a year and then be profitable in November, December. So that's what I mean by plan. Assume that reality in your business. Hold on to some cash. Don't reinvest it. Make sure your bank account is in a spot where you can sustain some lean times during the seasonal headwinds. Okay. And build your whole calendar around that and resist. And this is number 2, maybe this is 1A, I don't know. Resist the temptation to overspend in the bad moments to force it to happen. Instead of doing that, go try to make the big moment bigger. That's the best way to plan around seasonality in your calendar. Okay. So that's number 1, plan accordingly. And again, sort of 1A would be keep cash in your bank account for those moments. 1B would be to think about this even on the level of your promotional calendar and think about how you can approach marketing moments in a way that's going to make those seasonal moments bigger. So that's what I mean by plan. Plan, forecast, build around the business. Number 2, and this is kind of related to that, don't freak out. Don't freak out. Don't go firing people. Don't go, this is related to planning. But when you have those moments, accept them. Accept that reality and don't freak out. Instead, assume that's going to happen. Try your best to just accept the reality and keep your head down on making the next moment bigger. Again, this is very much related to planning, but it's really important. And I'm saying this especially for earlier stage businesses that haven't seen this. It's so tempting to think something is fundamentally wrong. We're really screwed. We got to fix it. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with your business. There really isn't. So just don't freak out. Just stay steady. Keep working on the big problems. Sometimes, I've argued with Taylor Holiday about this a little bit. Sometimes there's an emphasis on daily forecasting, daily planning. And if you get behind on your ad spend, you got to make drastic actions to go solve the problem. And I understand that mentality. I think in some businesses, it's a really good idea, especially as you get larger, then you may have to do something like that. One concern I have about that idea is that I think it can lead to a kind of short-termism. And in relation to the seasonality issue, and this can actually be true for all kinds of issues when you run up against challenges in your business, most challenges in your business do not get solved quickly. They are hard problems. That's why you're running into it. That's why they're challenges. And so they require larger efforts. And so, yes, sometimes if the cash is dwindling enough, you got to just run an extra sale and get rid of stuff and move inventory off the shelf. I get that. But many of these problems that you are going to run into are actually harder to solve. They're going to require larger, more serious creative challenges, creative iterations. They're going to require new offers. They're going to require new products. They're going to require new marketing moments, whatever it is, new seeding efforts, influencer efforts, email effort, whatever. And they just aren't going to happen quickly. And so by not freaking out when things are getting bad, again, this is a more general principle beyond even seasonality, you can put your head down and say, how can I solve the larger problem that is going to move me forward with a bigger swing, as opposed to making a small change here and there? Again, make the small changes if they're going to work, right? Like don't sit on your hands either. But if there is something you can do that requires relatively little time and effort and might make a real impact, by all means, do it. But at the same time, take the larger swing. So number 2, don't freak out. Number 3, as I said, alongside making the planning and making those moments bigger when you have tailwinds is what you can try to do to fight seasonality, is you can think about, is there a product development answer to this problem in my business? Can I generate products that are counter cyclical to the seasons that I currently have, right? So imagine this bikini brand that I mentioned earlier, right? Is there some way for you to develop a product that is still within the realm of swimwear? I don't know. I don't even know what this would be. Or maybe you just go broader apparel. Maybe you started with bikinis, but you start thinking about how do we make our way into the rest of apparel? Can you go and think about how to create products that actually themselves fit into different seasonal tailwinds than the ones you currently have? Let's take FC Goods. FC Goods is a better example, okay? If I wanted to make FC Goods bigger at the time, again, while it's made out of baseball gloves, maybe something I would do is try and capture more of the baseball season moment. So not just May into June, but like what about April at opening day when baseball fans are there? Is there a product that I would maybe buy for myself, not just for somebody else, like a wallet made out of a baseball glove, maybe a lower barrier to entry price point, something that I could buy for myself as a baseball fan to commemorate the baseball season or to get started and get enjoying it. That would be maybe one way to think about the problem. Maybe instead of that, even you think about Mother's Day. You think, is it possible for me to generate a product that is more appealing to women than a leather wallet made out of a baseball glove that could capture that same gifting energy, but could actually grab Mother's Day as a gifting holiday instead? That would be the other biggest gifting holiday of the year, right? The three biggest are like the holiday season, BFCM into Christmas, plus Father's Day and Mother's Day. Those are the three biggest ones. So maybe we could generate some kind of product that was more appealing to a female baseball fan or something like that. That would capture that moment. Now I don't know what that is off the top of my head, right? But that's maybe the way I would think about that problem. So can you think about this from a product development angle? If you don't think about it from a product development angle, it's almost impossible to beat the headwinds and the tailwinds. That might actually be okay. There are plenty of businesses that do awesome by capturing large tailwinds. So you may not need to actually do this. Again, this may be spinning your wheels to solve a problem that doesn't really need solving at all. That actually, it would be better for you to think more about don't try to beat the seasonality that you're currently dealing with, but instead accept it, like I said earlier. And again, just do everything you can to make the current moments you have bigger and bigger and bigger until that well really dries up. Many people will abandon that way too soon. Don't abandon it too soon. Keep pushing hard. Keep attempting to do everything you can to make those moments bigger before you abandon that plan. Okay, so accept it. So number one, plan. Number two, don't freak out. Number three, product development as another solution. And then number four, there's one other thing I would think about for seasonality, which is there are some things you can do to try to make your smaller moments bigger that don't require Herculean efforts, okay? And the most obvious example of this is running a few extra promotions during the year to do this. And if you think about the idea of a promotion, right? The idea is you bring the price down. Think about what price is for just a second. Price goes up when there is a lot of demand and not that much supply, okay? And so what seasonality really is a way, that term, all I really mean by that is peaks and valleys in demand. And so when demand goes way up, you probably don't need to discount as much. Now, actually, I think, again, one way you could potentially, if there is no constraint on supply, right? So think about this. If you have plenty of inventory, it actually may make tons of sense because to run a sale during a peak moment, because like I said, that will actually make that moment even bigger. If you've got tons and tons of demand and no constraint on supply, you can actually bring price down a little bit and probably generate even more conversion off of that demand. Okay. Now, if you're going to run out of inventory, you should do the opposite. You should never discount anything, and you should maximize the contribution margin you're going to take on every piece of inventory that you have. Okay. So that's the case. But in the lower moments, when there is a decrease in demand may also for you generate a decrease in price. And that's the way price works, right? The price holds this equilibrium between demand and supply. And again, most e-commerce businesses aren't truly supply constrained, so that side of things is not as important in the equation necessarily. Again, sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. You have enough inventory, whatever, and so you can go and partly make your lower moments bigger by running a few well thought through sales. And this is, I think, one of the best uses of a sale is to generate a spike in revenue in a lower moment that makes sense to do it on, where you're not going to go like torpedo your brand's value or anything like that. This is very common in apparel, right? Clothes go out of season, and the idea is there's a decrease in supply, there's a decrease in demand, and you've got some supply left, and you need to move that, turn that inventory back into cash. And so there's a sales section of a website as clothes that are going out of season need to get moved, and it's an effective way to do that without hurting the brand's brand equity. And so that's basically the way I would think about this same thing. If you want to make your lower moments bigger, instead of absolutely beating your head against the wall to try to make your evergreen ads work better for you in a moment of low demand, instead what I would say is, what can you do to spike your demand at least a little bit by running a thoughtful, well-executed sale that doesn't eat up your entire marketing team's efforts? So don't do that. Don't do what I just said at the cost of better marketing during your tailwind moments. So if it's going to cost you better tailwind marketing, don't do what I just said. If your team is too small, if it's too much of a lift, don't do it. But if you have a well-executed, well-thought-through plan for your tailwind moments, okay, then you can then go and think about the same thing for your headwind moments and think, okay, I can drive some additional revenue and every little bit counts. I can do, again, a product release or whatever it is, and every little bit counts. And the truth is, those moments can still be pretty good. Decrease in demand doesn't mean no demand. And so there's still something to capture there. There's also ways in which in an ad account, you can do this too. If you keep hammering away at your evergreen ads, it's possible that they're going to get very low spend in your headwind moments, but that by having them ready to go in the ad account, you've got more bullets to fire during your tailwind moments. And that ends up being really useful as well, because then you'll get a bunch more spend on a bunch more ads when that time comes. And so the evergreen efforts during your during your headwind moments, the evergreen efforts during those times can actually create value during your tailwind moments. That's the way I would think about it, okay? I would think about, how do I do things that are going to multiply their value in those key moments? Okay, so let's just recap really quickly. Recognize the reality of seasonality in your business. It's a bigger factor than you think. Recognize it. And after you've recognized it, then do a few things. Number 1, plan. Okay, number 2, don't freak out. Number 3, what was number 3? Oh, product development. Product development is the pathway. That's so funny. I forgot. Number 3, product development is the pathway to potentially solving seasonality. If you can do it in your business, it's really hard. It's not an easy problem to solve, but if you can do it, it can be a really good way to go. Number 4, think about some promotional moments during your headwind moments. Okay, those are the 4 things to do. Above all, if you listen to this episode and take one thing away, and it's that seasonality is a really big factor in your business, and don't freak out and plan for it, I'd be very, very happy. That'll get you really, really far. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for watching, for listening today. Don't miss my new sponsor, BILY. That's BI.ly, to go get better tracking on your meta ads. And of course, as always, my good friends at More Staffing are part of the show. I'm so grateful for them. Virtual systems can be helpful. Virtual professionals can change your business. Last night, I was with a friend who was telling me the same thing that I say all the time, which is he just doesn't know why you wouldn't go for great talent in the Philippines if you're already a remote culture in the first place. It's a clear value add in the business. Go check those 2 out. And if you want to work with me, please do that at ajfgrowth.com. You can email me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com. And I would love to hear from you on Twitter at Andrew J. Ferris. All kinds of great episodes coming up as usual. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. Talk to you soon.